Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on navigating open source intelligence and disinformation risks. This webinar is hosted by Comintelli, a highly regarded company with a rich history of over 2 decades of experience in marketing competitive intelligence. With its AI-assisted tools, Comintelli enables businesses globally to make informed strategic decisions and gain competitive advantages. Leading the session today is Brian Fuller, Executive Director for CRAT at Mercyhurst University, and joining him today is Jesper Martell, the CEO of Comintelli. We are privileged to have their expertise and insights today. Without further ado, I'll pass the controls over to our presenters.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here together with Brian as well. My name is Jesper Martell. I'm the CEO of Comintelli. I think this is a very, very interesting topic today that we have. I'm super excited about some of the insights that have come out of Mercyhurst. Perhaps disinformation has typically been associated perhaps with nations and more with political manipulation and things like that. But I do think this is something that we can see in the corporate world, in the private world, also becoming more and more of an issue. What information can you trust? What are the best sources? I think we see with social media and generative AI, the volume of information and the speed at which information is passed along and spread has grown so quickly in the last few years. So this is becoming a big issue, not just for states and nations, but also for corporations. So Brian, I'm super excited to have you here with us today to pick your brain and hopefully you can shed some light on this issue, and we'll see what we come up with.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for asking me to join you for this, what's hopefully very informational and, hopefully the audience or those participants here today, thank you for your time. You'll gain something from this that'll help you be better in doing your companies or agencies' disinformation or countering disinformation operations.
Great. Do you want to start a little bit and just lay some foundations for what we're going to talk about?
Sure.
I think everyone knows the problem and the issue at hand, but maybe just describe a little bit the project that has been the foundation of this.
Yeah, so as you'll see on the screen, the logo that says BI Squared Lab. We have a lab here at Mercyhurst University inside our Center for Intelligence Research Analysis and Training, which I'll refer to as CRAT throughout the webinar. The Security Executive Council, who works a lot in the private sector with corporations, from Fortune 50 all the way to smaller tier 2 and 3 companies. They sponsor that lab, the BI Squared Lab, inside the CRAT. And one of the things they do is they bring us problem sets that need solutions from within the private sector when it comes to risk and security. And their team, headed by Mr. Bob Hayes, the president of SEC, came to us and said, hey, we're seeing a huge problem with disinformation causing more and more risk and risks to security within the private sector. I think we need to use our resources to try to identify the problem, define the problem, and then come up with some solutions or potential solutions and begin to build on that for arming the private sector, GSOCs, analysts, risk and security professionals with the ability to provide vetted and non-disinformation, if that's even a word. I'm gonna copyright that. Non-disinformation to their decision.
That means it's true.
To their decision. Yeah, to their decision makers. So that's what you see here. This was the CRAT SEC project.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, this was built. This study was done by expert students here in the CRAT lab in the BI Squared. But it's also the SEC provides us mentors and subject matter experts from within the field with over 30 plus years each of experience in the private sector or within the government in dealing with these types of issues.
And when was the study conducted?
The study was conducted over basically the last 6 months.
Okay.
It finished up at the end of May, and it was led by soon-to-be senior Intel analyst Jenna Van Schaik, who is our student director for the BI Squared Lab, and her team. The project started with defining the problem. I think it's key to define disinformation. Then it went into doing some case studies to better understand disinformation.
Yeah.
And then it moved into what solutions are out there that kind of currently exist, or tools that currently exist. And then what is the solution that we can provide and build off of as we move forward. And we'll go over all of that during this webinar. Just a caveat, we're not going to go over all the tools and everything that we found or we recommend, but at the end of the webinar is contact information for the CRAT. If you're interested in us providing you a list of those tools that we recommend or platforms we recommend, we will talk about how we use intelligence today for this. But if you want a list of some of those tools, then we can send them to you.
Yeah. No, and obviously this study is so new, but I think we look forward as well to taking part and perhaps integrating with some of the tools that you've been looking at to help, I think, identify and spot this information. So if we can integrate that, I think it would be a nice solution.
Absolutely.
Great, but so these are the areas that we will be talking about today. And again, for the audience, feel free to jump in and ask questions in the chat function. We will have some time at the end for a Q&A session, but let's get started then. Maybe just a quick background on Mercyhurst, Brian?
Yeah, so I think it's important that everyone understands the expertise that goes into when we provide these types of studies and how big the center really is. We get a 360-degree approach to everything that we do, because we operate in both the private sector, government, law enforcement, and non-government organizations. So we're able to see the problem set not just from one lane through one lens. We get to see it through multiple lenses, which allows us to better understand the problem and come up with solutions from all different areas. As you can see, the BI Squared Lab is one of the production labs that falls underneath our 6 current programs within the CRAT. So this just gives you kind of an overview of that we have a vast amount of data and information that we pull from, and experts that we work with to drive our projects.
Great. And we're not going to go
No.
this slide in every single word, but just a quick back, because you mentioned defining what we mean by disinformation. I think that is really important.
I think Jesper, the big one on here for everybody to take away is the difference between disinformation and misinformation.
Yeah.
So those are really two of the big ones.
The first two there. Yeah. And one is obviously with more malintent, and the other is more people are doing things wrong, or just but with no evil intentions.
Right. One's more agenda driven. The other one's just ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Did you work anything on sort of the defining disinformation?
We did. One of the challenges that we came up with at the beginning of this was, what is disinformation, right? And not disinformation as in the general terminology of Webster's dictionary, definition of it, but really, how does it apply in the private sector and what is currently occurring? Because you're looking at numerous actors, both state and non-state actors, that are conducting disinformation. So we're talking governments conducting this that have specific programs to do it. Then you're looking at non-state actors that either may be doing it on the behalf of a state nation, or doing it as a agenda driven for whatever their view is on it. Some doing it just because they want to do it for fun and cause disruptions. And then we get into more of the undefined areas of it, which is in the competitive landscape disinformation, which it's been going on for years. You look at it almost as part of countering, counterintelligence for counter espionage, corporate espionage. It's countering that. And disinformation has always been done, but it's never really been defined as an activity that, that is able to be, defined and then being able to be structured in a way that you can start to develop processes to understand it and counter it. Then you have your own individuals and then the activists that are out there. But the technology that is out there today is what everybody needs to worry about. So disinformation was, one of the things that we found was the spread of disinformation, the veracity of it, the volume of it is so great in today's technological world with social media, and everybody has more access to data, which is great. We're more informed, but it also creates an environment that makes it more conducive to quickly spreading disinformation, especially in oppressed areas or areas with limited infrastructure to be able to vet the information properly. But the problem really became in the private sector was one of the things we found was being able to define this for the private sector in a way that GSOC analysts or analysts working in intelligence operations could identify it, but how do you counter it, or how do you process it so it doesn't make it into the products that you're putting in front of your decision maker, which could seriously harm the bottom line of a company or its operations.
Yeah. No, and I can completely relate to that. I mean, as you say, disinformation has probably been around for a very long time. People have been trying to do this, but as you say, I think it's the technology, Gen AI and social media, just the spread of it and the damage it can do has been multiplied in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and one of the things that the team did great in this product as well was coming up with the techniques, tactics, and procedures. That's probably one of the hardest things to understand, or to be able to, if you know what to look for and you know how it's occurring, it makes it much easier to identify disinformation. So we wanted to arm our clients or our members of the SEC and all of our partners with understanding what those TTPs look like from those actors that are out there conducting disinformation, which makes it much easier to quickly vet and be able to filter out that disinformation. So in the project itself, they did a really good job listing out a lot of the common TTPs by the different categories of activists, as you see bulletized there.
No, I can understand that this has been going on for a long time when it comes to, states and within states for political reasons, trying to affect people's opinions and votes and things like that. But could you give some examples of how this actually happens in the private sector and what competitors could be doing? Did you find anything there?
Yeah, absolutely. One, putting out disinformation on activities that may be occurring related to the company's research and development, right? Or competitors putting out information that can do brand damage to their competitors. Creating deepfakes has become probably the #1 newest technology that's really exacerbating the capability of doing disinformation is these deepfakes. Think of it as somebody's able to create a picture of someone that maybe OD'd on a pharmaceutical drug, right? And they're laying there OD'd, and the deepfake can put the label of a competitor on a bottle laying by that, right?
And you actually see companies doing this in order to harm their competitors,
So I can't say it's competitors doing it necessarily, but we do work, and that's why I came up with that example. We do work for a lot of pharmaceutical companies, where we're seeing it, where their labels and their brands are being put into deep fake pictures that can harm it, whether it's by on purpose by a competitor or it's by somebody that's just not happy with the company itself.
Activists and
activists or a disgruntled employee. It's so easy to make a good deep fake these days that anybody can do it. And I think it's going to be one of the newest capabilities, one of the most frequently used capabilities to discredit companies. You know, we saw a rise, I hate to say it, but we did see a rise for a while there in active shooters for disgruntled people. I think, honestly, we're going to start to kind of see some of that transition to deepfakes that can hurt the brand and hurt the company even more that way once once disgruntled and activists start to figure that out. But in the way of competitors, we do see disinformation that we work with companies that we have to vet out about things that are developing in an industry. You know, the airline industry comes to mind right now. There's been a lot of disinformation with all of the recent crashes that have come out about airlines and what really caused some of those crashes. And some of it's just been nonsense and really crazy, but people will believe that. So you as a company need to identify that, be able to identify that disinformation is coming out. You as a media outlet, you as somebody who's potentially pushing those news stories or pushing those social media posts, you need to vet that information and be able to understand if it's true or not. And people, don't do it because they don't know how to do the research and collection necessarily identify it. Yeah. But then they don't know how to counter it either. What do I do when I see that, right? As an analyst. Exactly. But we do see it. We do see a lot of disinformation coming out that quickly spreads. Yeah. And I think private sector companies need to be able to identify it and then be able to have a contingency plan in place, because it is a risk, and it is a risk to their security to counter that before it does spread.
No, and and maybe we'll come back to that, but that's an interesting question as well. One is you identify it and you can see it's coming out, but as you say, what do you do then?
Right.
What kind of maybe legal powers do you have, or technical powers do you have to limit the damage, and how do you handle that? It's a huge question.
And that's what we're trying to provide some solutions to, and we will continue. This study isn't, this is just the first phase of it. So we will continue to continually update this and work with the SEC to do that, and our trusted partners like Comintelli.
Great. And you had some, and maybe we don't have time to go into full detail here, but you had in the study, there were a couple of case studies as well. Silicon Valley Bank was one, and the other was Volkswagen, I think. I don't know if you want to comment. Was there anything here that sort of stuck out? I think this is interesting because it's, again, a private sector.
Well, this was a major case study for us in being able to identify a huge impact from disinformation here in the United States, right? And it affected a lot of the banking industry, as well as it affected a lot of companies and users of the Silicon Valley Bank and their decision makers wanting to understand what happened here, what was the collapse, what caused this, so they could react to it and figure out how it affected them. And one of the things we found was the woke movement jumped on this and put out that it was woke policies from the DEI initiative that was the cause of this, and that couldn't have been farther from the truth, right? It was really China and Russia picked up on it and realized that this is something that they could take this disinformation, and it was causing a huge problem in the DEI community, for the government, for the private sector that had these DEI policies, especially in the banking industry, where they're going to have these issues. And it caused a lot of division between liberals and conservatives. So once China and Russia and our foreign state actors saw this, they said, hey, we can continue to divide the country politically and continue. This is great for us. Let's go ahead and use our bot networks, and let's go ahead and push this out and continue to provide this disinformation and try to turn it into some type of believable truth that will continue to divide the country.
Then it sounds like it's a bit opportunistic. So someone may start it, and it's not really planned or organized, but it kind of grows on its own.
Absolutely. And then what you start having is you started getting the mistrust in the banking system, right? So now you're getting this
from Silicon Valley Bank to other banks as well.
Right. And it started to spread. And then you start to see populations starting to get upset, and then their political representatives are now trying to figure out how to calm them down, how to quash that, because they're getting blown up about, should I go take all my money out of any bank that the government has imposed DEI policies on?
Yeah.
Right. So this was a great study for us because there was a lot of technology involved in this study as well, because it was most recent, with the ability and the spread, the veracity at which the information spread was quite alarming.
I remember that. Yeah. I also remember this case, and this is a bit closer to Europe, but the Volkswagen emission scandal.
Yeah. So this was actually one that was kind of unique in the way that it was actually the company itself using disinformation to try to hide a problem with its cars. And so they were cheating on emissions tests and then still pushing out through their campaigns and their marketing and agendas and marketing agenda that everything was fine and that Volkswagen's diesel was the emissions were great and that the engines were new, just the engine itself and the emissions on it was good for the environment and that everything was great. Because they managed to trick the software into only when it was being tested, they could turn something on specifically to beat the test, but it wasn't always on in the car every time you started it. So it wasn't actually meeting emissions regulations. And it would have cost them, millions of dollars to recall all these Volkswagens and properly put the emissions technology on it. So instead, they just thought that they would try to trick the emissions testers and the public, right? And they got caught. And so this was kind of unique in us and how we could identify companies themselves using disinformation to trick consumers.
But would you say this is kind of borderline, almost like misinformation, that they weren't really aware of what they were doing, or if they were doing it on purpose, or what would you say on that?
I would call this disinformation
because they found out and then they kept on.
Right, because they purposely were putting it out after they found out that there was a defect.
Yeah.
So the misinformation part of it would have been, okay, we're putting out commercials saying our diesel engine is one of the top in controlling emissions. Yeah. And then they find out there's something wrong with it. They pull the commercial, they start doing recalls, and then they fix it, right? That would have been misinformation. But from the point they figured out that there was a problem with it and they weren't going to recall the vehicles, and they kept putting out the information as it being emission friendly, that became disinformation.
Yeah. No, totally agree.
Yeah, so that was kind of unique.
Now, these are two good examples of disinformation in the private sector, and I'm sure there's lots more. But did you ever come up with? For a corporation, everyone wants this to have a solution, but do you think is there even a solution for this?
There's starting to be. So we did identify what can be used right now and as a solution to start to work on this, but it's going to continue. We're going to have to continue to update that solution and get feedback from our users on this. SEC will actually be publishing this study through their members and through their website and through their materials. The material. If you're not subscribed to them, they put out great information on risk and security. They have great products on that. But I also want to work with Comintelli to push it out to all of your members and all of your clients and users as well, as part of the SEC Mercyhurst solution. We did find the first thing is, and the first thing that companies need to do is just have training on what disinformation is, kind of we're talking now, and how to identify it. I think that's the first thing, to even make aware of what it is, how it exists, and then identify who's responsible for countering that. Who's your disinformation expert? Multi-factor authentication helps with not following for deepfakes or deepfake information coming in. you want to put something in place as well with some type of software, which exists, which is in that tool set that we identify,
Yeah.
that can help you to quickly identify if something is a deep fake. Like IMGOps is a great free online tool that you can just plug a deep fake into, and it'll actually tell you if it's been photoshopped or modified, and then it'll pull it apart for you. And then you can actually use it to search for the original, where the original pictures or where the original parts of the deepfake came from. It can also, there's tools out there that can help you with identifying that deepfake as well, and being able to quickly identify if there's other information related to what the deepfake is trying to tell you on the internet or in databases, so you can quickly counter that deepfake. There are AI platforms out there, and that's going to be the big thing, right? So just as AI is enhancing disinformation, there's a lot of good tools out there like Intelligence Today that can help you with identifying or providing information that can help you to counter disinformation or identify disinformation quickly. The biggest way to counter disinformation is to actually find all of the information around that subject or that topic, and then being able to make an analytical decision on, analyze the data and then make an informed decision on whether you think it's fake or not, right? Whether you think it's disinformation or not. AI can help you with that. There are a lot of tools out there that are being developed to help you, not necessarily built to counter disinformation, but built to be able to provide you the data and information you need to identify it. But we have a solution we're working on that we're hoping to train. We have a Gen AI platform that we're trying to train Rover from Visru, that we're trying to work with to have it tell us if it thinks it's different from disinformation by the way the software has been trained by what our study is going to feed it, and then ask it to give us kind of an accuracy score on what it thinks the disinformation, whether a piece of data is disinformation or not. And that's really going to be built by the data that you're able to access yourself. So you can do it with a Gen AI, or you can do it with a human analyst. The Gen AI will be much quicker, but the human analyst can do it as well, as long as they have access to further resources to vet that piece of information.
And isn't maybe that the best solution? Is that, I mean, Gen AI can take you through the volume, but at some point to really decide, you almost need a human to decide if it is disinformation or not. That must be quite hard.
Absolutely. You can't. I caution everybody with some of the Gen AI that exists today. I am pro Gen AI to the core, but I caution people with the fact that you also need to understand that some AI will hallucinate. And so you cannot take the human out of the loop. The human needs to be the last step in the vetting process to ensure that everything followed a critical process in identifying and vetting the disinformation, and that the AI didn't hallucinate, and that it did properly pull from good data sources, and that you agree with the results that are coming out of that before you put it in front of a decision maker, and that you give it an accuracy score, right? There's nothing wrong with giving something an accuracy score and saying, I'm, 75% sure this is disinformation, right? Or I'm 80% sure that this is not disinformation, right? Or I believe this is misinformation. Yeah.
No, and I like that. That was what you had this step-by-step solution, which you started to explain a little bit here. But I mean, if you find something, it comes very much down to the sources, I guess.
Hey, Brian, real quick. Somebody asked what the name of the tool was again to identify deepfakes.
We have a whole list of them, but I mentioned IMGOps.
Okay.
Thanks.
There's other ones out there. Photo forensics. I believe it's FOTO. Photo forensics is another one.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you want a full list of some of the tools that we've recommended or that we found that can help you with this information, on the last slide is the CRAT website. you can go to our website and all of our contact information is on there, and you can reach out to us and we'll provide you that information. Just as well, SEC can help you with that as well.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, great question.
You want to run through this process real quick? I mean, you mentioned vetting the sources, but this is kind of like the process is like a combination of using technology and then having humans come in, and then it kind of goes a bit back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of the things I tell everybody is you've got to vet the information, right? No matter what you're doing, you've got to vet your information. So it's nothing new to tell an analyst to stop and verify a source credibility.
No.
If I hope Kathleen Kiyotaka, I can never pronounce her last name correct. We call her K2 from the SEC. I hope K2 is on here. She's one of the most brilliant minds I've ever encountered when it comes to source vetting and checking source credibility.
Yeah.
We teach everyone you got to stop and do this, whether you're looking at it as disinformation or not. So it's an easy step to incorporate, just look at disinformation as part of your vetting process. After you stop and you're verifying the credibility, one of the things we haven't touched on yet is you can actually look and see there's websites out there that list types of disinformation. Wikipedia is great at this. I don't use Wikipedia as necessarily a trusted source, but I use Wikipedia as an informational source. And oftentimes they'll have a page. People, when they get burned by something, everybody wants, whether it's a bad website, whether it's bad data, everybody wants to make sure they tell everybody it's part of their therapeutic analytical process to feel better about getting tricked. So they'll post it on websites like Wikipedia that this was disinformation or don't trust this information. Again, anyone can post on Wikipedia, but it is a good place to go to initially check and see if something's been listed as disinformation. Make sure you use multiple sources as well. Then the next thing, you're vetting the sources. Some of the things we look at is we will what we're saying with vet sources, look for other sources of information, but also do the scratch and sniff test, match it up. There's a lot of disinformation coming out right now about what's happening between Israel and Iran, right? So if there's disinformation coming out that the United States has overthrown the Iranian government, the United States has not overthrown the Iranian government, all right, yet. Could it happen? Yes. So you look at the timeliness at which some of this disinformation is coming out, and is it because of the opportunity, as you said, Jesper, to be able to promote this disinformation? So look at the source, look at the timeliness of it, look at the history of it.
The reason behind it. Why is someone publishing this, and who benefits from this coming out? And
right, exactly. And then you want to look at who it is that's publishing it. Is it a trusted source? Have you used them before? That's a key thing too. We keep a list of trusted sources of where we've gotten good information, and we keep a list of sources that we've gotten bad information from. So keep those. Leverage vendors. All right. I know they can get kind of expensive, but they're the experts a lot of times in pulling data in. I'm not necessarily saying go out and pay a vendor, these large vendors, to do it for you. What I'm saying is platforms like Intelligence Today, Recorded Future, those type of platforms, they're specialized in what they can provide and the tools that they have. Use them, right? Subscribe to them. It'll make your job a lot easier, and you'll get through that giant volume of data, that big data environment, a lot quicker, and be able to you'll get the return on the spending on what you spend on these vendors and what you save in time and accuracy and information you're providing your decision makers. And we have a list of vendors that we recommend as well. Then you've got to assess the risk on it, right? And again, I go back to everybody kind of knows how to assess risk, but if you really want a good product for assessing business risk, Intelligence Today provides some good ones. SEC really has a great product on this. It's like a heat map of assessing a business risk. It's on their website. If you go to it, it's one of the products that they have. I really recommend it. and then flag the source as unviable for the future. That goes back to what I said about keeping lists. Keep a list of good information, bad information, and the vendors behind it, who's pushing it out, even usernames, right? Because users can pop up on different forums and different sites. If you see a typical user spreading the same information, look for bot networks, identify potential bot networks. If you don't know how to identify a bot network, there's a lot of great videos on YouTube that a bunch of smart people made that can teach you that. And then staying up to date is also very important, right? Not just staying up to date on the geopolitical events occurring, things that may be occurring in your industry, but keeping up with the evolving technology on disinformation and the solutions that are out there. Things change overnight. You know, I used to make it a point when I was a government analyst, I used to make it a point to come in every morning, and my focus area, I would spend an hour just updating myself on anything that may have changed in both the geopolitical realm, headlines that were coming out, new technologies, so things that would change and affect my environment so I could keep up with it and then be able to provide proper information to my decision makers. So staying up to date is going to be huge, and staying up to date with what we're providing with our partners in SEC. I know I keep talking about SEC, but that's because they're the ones that are helping with this study. They'll help to promote it, and we'll make sure that we get it out to Comintelli as well, the updates that we do as we continue with this study.
Great. And I guess the last point as well, to keep up to date, again, helps you perhaps understand why people are sending out disinformation, because I think that's an important part of identifying it as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a shameless plug to Intelligence Today. Intelligence Today is a great source to help you to do your knowledge management and keep up to date. So I really recommend Intelligence Today because it'll really give you a dashboard to help you do this very quickly.
Thank you. I won't comment that any further. No, and you have this as sort of the final slide, but and we don't have to go through this in detail as well. But as you say, it is I think using some sort of tool to help you cope with the volumes of information is almost something a must-have if you want to detect information and get early warnings early on. So yeah.
Right. And
I have a quick question too from the audience.
Sure.
Is it worthwhile building a Gen AI solution that only contains trusted sources? If so, can we get the list of trusted and non-trusted sources from CRET?
You can, and we have built that. That's exactly what we have built inside the CRAT. We have built a workflow for that. And yes, I will say yes, the Gen AI that we're using is an on-premise solution. The safest way to utilize a Gen AI solution is to have it directly on your network, whether and locally deployed, and then pulling from a data lake of trusted sources. We have done it. It's a huge undertaking, but it can be done. But what's great is if you just want to use your own internal data as well, the Rover platform can be deployed locally and housed locally for that. But as an analyst, you need to be able to access outside information. And the trick became, how do we use a Gen AI solution that doesn't access web-based information to get its data, which then can be compromised and bring back dirty information or bad information or disinformation. So yes, if you'd like to talk more about that and talk more on that solution, please reach out to me and I will be more than happy to do that. But it is intellectual property. I just want to caveat with that. It is intellectual property that we have developed with some trusted partners on this solution. And then we do hope to market this solution at some point once we've finished the proof of concept. The goal is to have it completely done by the end of summer and ready to share with our CRAT clients and then roll it out to through a trusted vendor to a marketplace.
Great. Time to start concluding a little bit, sort of and we again will have a couple of minutes for a Q&A session. But based on the study, any sort of key takeaways from your side, Brian, that you think, or something that surprised you before you started the study? Any sort of conclusions that you've made on disinformation?
I will say yes. So the biggest surprise was how many people were uneducated on disinformation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that, not necessarily they didn't know what it was, but they weren't in their intel processes. That last slide you showed had the intel cycle and the intelligence value chain.
Yeah.
If you look in that, what you can see is anywhere in there, there's an opportunity for disinformation to creep, right? Or to influence any part of these cycles. It was kind of alarming to me knowing how many intel professionals out there working in the private sector don't have some type of process in place to counter disinformation, right? But then after talking with the SEC, I come to realize it's because I was in the government for so many years and in the military for so many years, and they are so focused on a lot of disinformation campaigns. It's part of conventional warfare. It's part of asymmetric warfare. In the private sector, this is something kind of new because of the development. You know, corporate espionage has always been there, but it was more done on a human basis, and it was more intricate. It took a lot more work to do. It doesn't anymore. So the technology has outpaced what I have found is the technology has outpaced the risk and security processes for identifying and countering disinformation. So
interesting.
So originally, I'm not surprised anymore, but that was an initial surprise to me, is how little disinformation was actually being countered in the private sector.
While we're on this slide, somebody says, what is the difference between the intelligence cycle and the intelligence value chain roadmap on the slide?
The intelligence cycle is more of a general cycle that's used by intelligence analysts, especially in the government and focused on law enforcement, more of that tactical, strategic type of intelligence. The intelligence value chain is more built for the corporate or private sector and more softened on the edges because it's got a lot more. The intelligence cycle is a lot more built for information, driving information for decision making. The intelligence value chain incorporates a lot of revenue generation, profit generation, bottom line, and helping to decision makers to better their internal processes for the end of the day, which is making more, revenue, generating more revenue. They're kind of interchangeable, though. It's just what you're using them for. Like I said, the left is more strategic, tactical processes. The one on the right is more softened for the corporate private sector.
Follow-up question on this slide. Why is there not defense/counterintelligence step in either of the intelligence cycle or the IVC roadmap if it is so important?
That's a great question. And one of the things that we're doing with SCIP right now, you'll see SCIP up in the top. We have intelligence centers of excellence that bring professionals together to talk about and practitioners together to talk about the IVC, the intelligence value chain, what needs to be changed, what needs to be updated, what are we missing? So that is a great point. I think with everything we're talking about today, there probably does need to be a step in there. It is a sub-step of the intelligence cycle, but I do agree with the IVC. We probably need to incorporate that more into the steps of the IVC. That's a great question, a great point, and reach out to me. I'd love to have you join us for our next Intelligence Center of Excellence meeting, SCIP meeting, and we can talk more on that and talk with everyone about maybe incorporating it into the IVC and then sending that out to the SCIP consortium.
And I guess maybe this is part of you have data acquisition there. Maybe this is just making sure that the data is correct.
It could fit in there. Absolutely. Data generation, data acquisition. Yeah, either one. Even data analytics may be falling in there.
Exactly. Those three. Yeah.
So yeah, I like that. I like that comment, whoever made it. I can't see, but that was a great question and comment. It does fall in the intelligence cycle, but it doesn't fall in the IVC yet.
Yeah.
But it will.
That question was anonymous, so maybe they'll reach out to you.
Oh, yeah. Now Anonymous is on here trying to figure out how to counter our disinformation.
I know, exactly.
Disinformation, right?
We do have a non-anonymous question. Are companies themselves like OpenAI investing in identifying disinformation?
That I can't answer yet. That I'm going to say yes, because SEC reached out to us with this project, and they have their finger on the pulse with a lot of the private sector companies and decision makers of what they want and what they want to do. So I'm going to say yes. There are companies out there looking for this solution and willing to invest in it. I can't give you specifics on who or what industries. Jasper, maybe you could talk a little bit about on that too, from a Comintelli perspective.
I agree with you, because I think this is very new in the corporate world, at least, and I think it's something people are starting to and that's kind of the purpose of this webinar as well, just to understand that it exists and identify it, and that's kind of the first step. And the second step is then how do you counter this, and what tools are there to detect it, and I don't think we're quite there. I haven't seen any solutions in the private sector.
Right, and that's why we're doing this. This is what the BI Squared Lab exists for. Is to find solutions like this for the private sector on these bigger problem sets.
Okay, we have another one. Can you elaborate on how senior leaders / stakeholders receive the analysis prepared from following the steps listed for countering disinformation in the private sector? Are there standard responses? Have you found that they're receptive?
We don't have the responses yet. It just so lined up with this webinar that we just completed the study and passed it to SEC. The Security Executive Council is now going to push it out to its members to determine to try it out and get feedback on that. We will try to use it with our CRAT clients and pushing that out to get their feedback on it and helping them. We will have kind of a survey that we want to utilize to get the feedback. But as of right now, we haven't officially deployed it outside of what we're doing internally with the process. So we are at the point of deploying it to gather feedback, to do the beta testing, as you would say in the data world. So I can't answer that question right now. But it is a great question. If you reach out to me through the CRAT with your contact info, once we get some of that feedback coming back, we'll go ahead and share that with you. I will tell you, though, those that are doing anything like this, those that are doing, like we've done disinformation, countering disinformation in some of our projects, I'm not sure decision makers necessarily will see that as much as the analysts or the practitioners, because they should be the ones filtering it out and not and identifying it before it gets to the decision maker, right? I think the better response would be, how is disinformation affecting decision makers on what has made it to them, right? So if a practitioner is doing their job correctly, a decision maker should never even know disinformation came into the process. So it's really going to be, I think, feedback from the practitioners that's going to be key to us, and how it worked and what actually made it to the decision maker that they weren't able to filter out with our process. But I think it would be interesting to get information back on how it has really affected companies and decision makers when disinformation has made it into the final products that get put in front of them. So great question, and I'd love to follow up on that another time.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent topic for the next webinar in a couple of months.
Could be.
Perhaps we will have some cases even then.
And SEC would probably be great to have on the webinar as being able to talk to that and provide it, because they work in that risk and security field and have their pulse on how decision makers are being affected by disinformation.
Great.
Just to be mindful of time, we have a couple more questions, but then maybe we should wrap it up. And if anybody has any further questions, feel free to reach out.
Jesper,
So-
can you throw up that last slide so that everybody can see our contact info, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
So
There you
what role can Gen AI play in protecting companies from disinformation?
Well, the first thing Gen AI can do is it can, if it's trained correctly, like we're trying to do, it'll be built to identify key indicators of disinformation, or being able to filter out sources that you don't want it to pull information from, that you've identified as providing disinformation or untrusted. It's a challenge right now. It is going to be a challenge. I don't want to sit here and say there's a Gen AI solution to this, because the problem is a lot of Gen AI has to pull from the open web. By doing that, they're going to be affected. They're going to compromise themselves. It's got to be trained properly to identify those indicators. Where are those indicators going to come from? Well, studies being done like what we're doing in the BI squared, coming from the field itself with things that, sources in collaboration that have been providing dirty information or disinformation. Really having an on-premise solution is going to be the key, pulling from a trusted data lake that's being filled by APIs from trusted data sources. That's really the only way right now I have seen Gen AI being able to be fully capable of countering disinformation to a high level of certainty or a high level of confidence.
Perfect, thanks. Maybe we'll take this one as the last question, and then again, feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. So the question is, what actor types, for example, state, non-state, or corporate, is currently the most dangerous to the private sector, and why?
I'm going to say Russia or China, but to me, I'm going to say Russia. China focuses a lot more on not necessarily the private sector. Like they spend a lot more effort on disinformation with government and military, and trying to also steal information. Russia focuses more on the population and upsetting the population with disinformation, and trying to upset the financial sector, which includes the private sector and businesses, and disrupt that. But Russia has a much more defined disinformation network in being able to provide disinformation. Their bot network is probably one of the best in the world. And they have entire divisions set up of personnel to do nothing but provide disinformation, whereas China has more of a cybersecurity threat and stealing information infrastructure. That's more of their focus. Russia has more of a focus on the disinformation, especially on with political events as well. So I'm going to say Russia is probably the state actor that's affecting the private sector the most. Jesper, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but.
No, I don't really have any comments on that. Again, I think this is so new for the private sector. It's hard to identify where it's coming from, but it's something that I do think corporates have to become much, much better at doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you have significant intellectual property or R&D. I think your competitors are going to start conducting disinformation to keep you from getting ahead of them in the industry. But state actor wise, yeah, I do think Russia probably, because they just like to upset the apple cart with the population, and the private sector is part of that.
Thank you, thank you. I will wrap us up today because we are a couple minutes before the hour. So thank you so much, Brian and Jesper, for the insightful presentation. Definitely a lot to talk about, and I'm sure more to talk about in the near future. Thank you to all of our participants for being with us today and for asking so many great questions. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out via the contacts on the screen here. We look forward to the opportunity to connect with you again soon. Thank you and have a great summer.
Thank you, guys. It's been an honor.
Thanks, Brian.